We're back. We've got QBIQ Podcast, and as always, we try to bring you top talent, top coaching. Try to bring in QBIQ experience. We try to talk about the things that matter in the world of football. And today we've got a great one. I'm your host, Chris Hickson. I've got my co-host here, Chet Walters, who runs the Ops. Guys, if you don't know, out there in the QBIQ world, when you're talking to us, you're talking to Coach Walters. And I'm going to tell you, there's not a better guy to have along with you than Coach Chet Walters. So what do we got going on today?
Oh, man, it's just another day in the world of QBIQ.
So who do we have today?
Man, we've got Coach Dan Levy. And, this guy's been all over the place. You know those shows on Discovery Channel like Bear Grylls and these guys that go all over the world? Well, that's what this guy's done, but with football. And it's pretty crazy. Some of the stops are Brazil and Norway and Poland and Czech Republic and Italy. I mean, the list goes on. And so I met Dan last year, I guess 2017, at an all-star game. And, man, it was awesome. And we've kind of created a friendship from there. So, Dan, man, it's great to have you on.
Hey, Chet, thanks. And thanks, Chris. Thanks for you guys having me on. I'm excited. And I really like the Bear Grylls comparison.
I mean, you look like him a little bit, but then it's the overall experience, too.
In the football world, it's the Bear Grylls. You're all over the place making things happen. If I understand anything, he just came off a national championship season.
That is true. And again, a lot of credit goes to the organization out here. I mean, they make me the players, the management, my staff, everybody makes me a better coach, but bigger and better things ahead, even from that for sure.
So you guys just had a national championship with the Prague Panthers. I know you had another one the year before, right, in Brazil?
Yes.
So what? Compare the two of those. What were the differences? What were the similarities?
I mean, I guess in Brazil, that was my last year was my second year there, and we had a little bit of a different dynamic. So I got to kind of build that team from the ground up when I went there in 2016. It was their first year of like national competition. So going into 2017, we had won the second division national championship, and we were going to move up. So we knew we had to make some moves. We had to bring in some coaching help, and we had to bring in some players, both from the States and some top talent from in Brazil, from within the country. So, I mean, I really got to mold that program into on what I wanted. And then when I came over to PBP, the Prague Black Panthers, that was really kind of inheriting a team that had already experienced success. They were, I believe they were already 6-time national champions. There was a core staff in place, a core group of veteran players. So it was really me, instead of completely molding a team from the ground up into my vision, I had to bring my vision here and adapt some things and kind of pick and choose between, okay, what's important to building this program up, and what are things that, I mean, this is a different country, a different team, a different atmosphere. What are the things that maybe I don't need to change? So I think just going through those two different experiences, there was a lot of similarities, but a lot of things that were just a complete learning experience for me as well.
So Coach, from a perspective of winning a couple national championships in a row, you're kind of the overseas Belichick. So here's my question: what's your ingredients to making a team where its projection is to win the national championship? What's your structural ingredients to getting that done?
I mean, I think that the first thing, I'm coming in as a head coach, you always have to come in with a vision, and then you got to sell it to your guys, to the organization, to the coaching staff, and to your players, because you can believe whatever you want to believe, but if you can't sell it to the guys and they don't buy in, it's not going to matter. And I always tell other coaches that I talk to, and I guess if kind of my credo is a head coach has to come in and make decisions, and his players have to make him right. So as opposed to sitting there and waffling and dwelling on doing this or that, going for it on third down or on a fourth down, or are we going to do this? You prepare, you stick to what you believe in, and you decide. And if your players and your staff and your management is bought into what you're doing, they will make you right. So that vision that you bring to the team and the ability to sell it, hey, this is where we want to be. And of course, everybody says that they want to be champions. Everybody says that, but it's having that plan of how do we get there? Where are we now? Where do we need to be? And what is our plan? So that's kind of what I try to bring, no matter where I go or what country and team I go to.
Having those ingredients, that plan in the coaching world, in the professional world, wherever it is, we've got mentors. So who are some of the coaches that you had or that you learned from that play a part now in how you coach?
That's an interesting question. I came up in just kind of the path that I took. Like I didn't do a GA. I only coached like a little bit of high school ball before I started to coach overseas, and then I went back and I coached a little bit of college ball later. But I was really always searching for a mentor, and early on it was just kind of feeling my way out. And I think that mistakes and failure, especially early on, were my biggest mentors. Success, failure, and just I'm learning from that. And then, later on, I coached I was the offensive coordinator at Alfred State College, and my run game coordinator, Tony Spencer, who's now the wide receivers coach at the University of Idaho. He was a guy who I really saw as somebody I could turn to, and he was a coach who could coach both sides of the ball, new skill fundamentals, new offensive line inside and out, and was just a real. Coaching overseas, you have to be kind of a Renaissance coach because you probably won't have a full staff. So you got to be able to coordinate both sides of the ball. You got to understand special teams. You got to be able to coach up different groups. And Tony was a guy who I kind of saw me in that, like that's where I want to be, where I can kind of command all of those groups. So in a way, not having a true mentor for most of my career, I think that there's a lot of things I probably could have overcome and learned a little bit faster had I had someone to kind of bounce stuff off with. But also, I don't think that there's a better teacher than, success and failure.
Man, that's well said. Yeah, I like that.
No doubt on that. I mean, failure can be, you can only count really failure as truly a failure if you didn't learn anything from it, and you can't progress from it. If you stay in it, then it remains that definition of failure. So now when, something you said earlier when you said, hey, I've got my message and it's up to your players to make you right. I played for Danny White, and he used to say all the time, are you familiar with the motto CYA? Well, and his motto was CDA, cover Danny's tail. Make him right. And so it's a real consistent message that you hear from great coaches, because the bottom line is, like you said, you got guys that if they don't buy in, you're not going to be able to operate as a team and be able to go through game week and be successful. But if you buy in each week, each day, and you get a bunch of guys that are great bonding in the locker room, and then always have that mentality of max out. Like any opportunity to max out, and whatever that be, from the film room to the practice field, that builds a resume that suggests expectation of consistent winning. And so when I hear those words that you say, I find my puzzle pieces just so intrigued about it. And I think my interest always, because I don't have a great feel for what the football element, the football environment or skill level is over there in Prague. What is it like? How can you compare it? And then you knowing what you know, how quickly can you advance those guys to cover the gap in between where they are currently and trying to expectation of building them up to how American football is?
So, in terms of the level, whenever I discuss this, I always kind of compare it to Division III football, and there's some variations within there, but I say that because, for example, on one extreme, I got two offensive tackles who are brothers, and they're both 6'6". The older one's about 320 pounds, and the younger one's about 340, and they're great athletes. These guys, had they been born in the States and started playing football at a younger age, would be Division I players. But then you'll have guys who, maybe I have a defensive end who's 220 pounds. He's a good player, but I mean, he's an undersized guy. And then with the vast majority of overseas teams, whether you're talking about in Europe or in Brazil, you have these guys who could go, maybe a handful of guys who could play Division I, 1AA, or Division II ball on the same team with guys who just started playing the game and aren't at a JV high school football skill level yet. So, and you have these guys more or less operating on the same team. So one of your challenges coming in as a coach, of course, those guys who are already great players out here, you want to make them better because every player can improve. There's a lot of there's just not the access to coaching out here, especially at certain positions like offensive line, like QB. And these guys haven't had that access, even the great players, so you want to give that to them. But also, if you really want to succeed and you look at the top teams on the continent out here, they coach up their depth. So you get outside of your core 20 or 30 guys who are good college football level players. You get outside of that, okay, well, now I got another 30 guys who they need to be serviceable because injuries are going to happen at some point. Guys are eventually going to retire. We've got to be good with our youth program and making sure that these guys are coming in with a high football IQ. And that's the biggest challenge, I think, because you're short on resources out here. So we have, we have a smaller budget. We have less time because this is semi-pro, and a lot of these guys have their day jobs, so we don't get them all day, every day. And you have to figure out ways to, okay, how can we make them smarter, better players? How can we get them to buy in and, as you said, Chris, max out on their commitment to the program? So it's a really interesting dynamic that you don't find anywhere else. We're playing a Division III college team here on June 16th. It'll be the first time PBP's ever done that. North Central College from Illinois is coming up here, and we're going to play them. And that's going to be a big event for us, a big test, and we're going to really, get to see, are we competitive in this game? Can we win it? All those things.
Well, you mentioned that in some of the gaps, and that's something that we're looking to do here at QBIQ is how do we make that jump overseas and better help those guys over there understand the game? Because we're obviously QBIQ is a fundamental system to understand how defenses organically want to work inside their framework. And in terms of that, have you had any advancement? Have you been able to use any of the QBIQ stuff with your players and your installs?
Oh, for sure. And I'll actually touch on a couple of points there. The first one is, I think that QBIQ as a platform has a lot of value when it comes to international football, because if you compare, I'll start with, again, resource-wise. Just about every team in Europe has a limit on how many American players they can bring in. So, for example, for us, it's 3. For some teams, it's 4. For some teams, it's 2. Some teams, it's 1. And just about every team, I would say 95% of teams competing in one of the first division leagues in Europe use one of those finite spots on a QB. So bringing in an American QB to run their offense, and the reasoning behind that is, even if you have a guy who gets into your youth program when he's 13 years old, the question becomes, what access has he had to coaching, and what access has he had to experience? He hasn't played at the collegiate level, so he hasn't played against that level of competition, and most times he probably hasn't had the level of coaching that he would receive there. So there's a gap between a guy who's had that experience, a guy from the States, and a guy who's a European, maybe extremely talented, great athlete, good feet, great arm talent, smart guy, but just hasn't had access to that. So with QBIQ, I think that they can make up some of that ground because they're presented with a streamlined process to catch up on just like you said, how defenses operate, understanding how routes adjust, being able to grasp the playbook conceptually, and kind of segueing off of that gets me to my second point, which is, I think it's been very useful for our wide receivers and other skill groups as well, with the RDR and being able to really, hey guys, this is our system. Now get the middle reps so you learn it conceptually, and you're not just trying to get by memorizing your specific route as it's written on paper, okay, versus cover 3, I got that bang seam. Ball's going to come in fast. Well, now you understand that. So I've seen probably more than with our QBs, because we've been in a transition year. Our longtime Czech Hall of Fame QB, he retired after this year, and our backup to him after he delved into QBIQ, and we worked pretty extensively, he got signed by another team, which is unfortunate, but it's part of the business. So we're bringing in an American, and he's getting involved with it as well. But I mean, going back to fall camp, which we had in October, I mean, our receiver core, which all had access to the platform, had improved dramatically, understanding how to stem routes, understanding timing and spacing, and just having a higher football IQ, understanding things from the QB perspective as well as the defensive perspective. So I really think it attacks things specific to international football on 2 fronts. One, the ability for a homegrown European QB to kind of catch up and close that gap between them and maybe a QB from the States, and at least give you that close to that same level of performance, and on the other side, just the value it brings to all of your other skill groups, understanding offense and defense conceptually, and increasing their own football IQ.
And great answer. You know, we're obviously always excited to introduce it to anybody, but we get really excited to. I mean, every time we ship overseas, we get excited about who it is, what country it's going to. And especially when we get an opportunity to work with, somebody like the national championship Prague Panthers, for us, it's a exciting thing. And we've come to the point in this podcast, we're sitting here talking with Coach Dan Levy, who's a 2-time national championship coach, 1 time in Brazil, and back-to-back, he's run it up here in the Czech Republic. It's now time for a key question. Chet, here's my question. I got a key question. How about the kickers, Coach? How about the kickers? Are they pretty good? Because I mean, you guys they play soccer more often than football, right?
I mean, that's always something. That's the assumption that I had coming in, and that's the assumption that a lot of people have. And there are some good kickers out here, but it's not universally true that like you don't always see it, translating. I will say in Brazil in 2017, I had two really good kickers. And the really funny part of it was, no matter if you're in the States at any level, the kicker's kind of the exile. He's kind of on the team. Nobody really cares about him. Man, I had two kickers on my team in Brazil, and I called them our divas, because they didn't understand why they came to me after a few of our first practices in camp, and I'd only had one the year before, and we do field goal at the end, and they come up and they're like, "Hey, coach, now that there's two of us, I think we need more time, because we got two guys taking reps, and I think we need more time." And of course, we're always crunched on time. As I was saying, time is a resource out there, because you don't have these guys every day, all day. And I told them straight up, I said, well, I've got the simplest solution to that is I only need one kicker. And they were both kind of shocked by that, and they never said another word about getting more practice time. But man, they if you watch highlights from games there, they always show the extra points every time, and it's like the most boring part of the game. But in Brazil, they're going to show it. So in that sense, yeah, I mean, there's some pretty good kickers down there, of course. Cairo Santos is kind of a guy down there. He's playing for the Chiefs, and in Prague, the bigger sport out here is ice hockey, so you don't get quite as many or quite as much kicking talent, but you will never not have a kicker. I've never been in a situation where I'm like, man, I don't have a kicker. I've got to go a recruit run or find one. You'll always have somebody who, hey, they at least know how to kick a ball.
Oh man, well, I mean that's good, because I mean kickers are a necessity, obviously, and it's funny how you say they're the exile. They're definitely a different breed, without a doubt. They sometimes have that flamboyance, and it's always a funny characteristic to a team. So, hey, where do you guys kick it from? Do you guys kick it from the college, or do you do the NFL 35-yarder?
Oh, no. It's the college rules. At least it was last year. I don't think that they're going to change that rule, but most of our rules are all NCAA rules.
Gotcha. Coach Walters, man, do you have a key question for Coach?
Man, I don't have a key question. I just hopefully, we put some work together. We have some cool news coming with QBIQ, possibly heading out to Prague with Coach Levy this summer. I will leave it at that on my part.
Well, that's definitely a thing we need to talk about with Coach and figure out where we can take that. That'll be fun to not just send books and the system overseas, but send ourselves to help, spread the message. That'll be a blast. So, just to wrap up, obviously when you get a guy that has been basically all over the world coaching, knows the ins and the outs, has been at the college level here coaching, and knows how to transfer that message and get the world of football, its tentacles is all over the place. It's a unbelievable sport, and love getting guys that introduce it to other countries or raise the level in other countries. Dan Levy, coming off national championships, we appreciate you so much for spending your time with us today on the QBIQ Podcast. And we obviously wish you extremely well in getting your team ready for another national championship run.
Well, guys, thank you so much for having me on. We really appreciate the value that QBIQ has brought to our team, and I definitely hope that you guys can make it over here, not just for the football side, but Prague is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. So I'm sure that would be an experience that anybody would enjoy.
Sold. We'll see you this summer.
Absolutely.
We're going to work on that hardcore. Coach Walters, appreciate you as always running co-host with me today.
Yes,
Listen,
sir.
guys, you watched and listened to the QBIQ podcast. And we're just trying to bring you talent, trying to bring you coaches, trying to bring you extra special stories in the world of football, and I do mean world, especially on this edition of the QBIQ podcast. I'm Chris Hickson, your host. We will see you next time when we drop another one. Check it out for the QBIQ podcast. We drop usually on Mondays. All right, guys. See you later.